Hi everybody, got another video today on a Vietnam combat knife. This is a Gerber Mark II combat dagger. It was designed by a gentleman named Bud Holzman, who was a member of the 101st Airborne Division during World War II. And when Vietnam rolled around, he wanted to create a fantastic fighting knife for the guys fighting in Southeast Asia. So he created this dagger and approached Gerber with it, and they picked it up and started selling it commercially. It was never actually issued in Vietnam, but it was a very common knife to see use there. They're relatively expensive, about $25 at the time for the base model, which is what this one is. And looked very, very cool. So they were, even despite the price, often sold out at the PXs in Vietnam. The guys that had them cherished these knives for the most part. This one has certainly seen better days, but I'm still very happy to own it. So this is what's called the CT2 model. The CT2 was introduced around 1967. The first model, being the CT1, was essentially the same design. The only difference was that it had a canted blade. So this one you can see is straight like most knives. Canted blade would come down at about a 5-degree angle. The intention behind that was to make the knife ride closer to the body while it was in your sheath, to avoid picking up vegetation and snagging on things. And also I've read that it was used to help with the form that this knife was intended for in combat, which is kind of a fencing style jab and slash motion. Due to the natural bend in the wrist, it would kind of make a cleaner, more thorough cut, apparently. But when people received their knives after paying a relatively high price for them and saw that the blade was bent, they were kind of unhappy and started writing into Gerber because they just didn't realize that it was an intentional design. So they're like, hey, my knife's bent, and Gerber would oftentimes have to replace the knife with a non-bent model, or try to explain to them why it was. So they phased it out after about the first 3,500 made and started with this CT2 model. Gerber was kind enough to serialize every single one of these knives. So for the Vietnam era ones, the serial number is almost always going to start with a 0. In this case, it's 00 because this is a pretty early model. So 006596. That puts this knife right in the middle of the 1968 run on these. This knife has been being produced for years, all the way up until 2000. From Vietnam it was being produced, and then they halted for a while and started production again recently. The design has changed quite a bit, but it's still basically the same knife. A few hallmarks of the early Vietnam era knives are that they don't have any serrations on this wasped, kind of gladius looking blade, and the handle is made of a material, or coated in a material called cat's tongue, which was made by spraying molten aluminum mist over the molten steel mist over the aluminum handle. Because of that, if it was mistreated, it could rust off and create these spots, or be rubbed off, really. It wasn't a very thick layer, but it did create a superb kind of extremely fine grit sandpaper grip. So yeah, the things to look for early models are no serrations and a cat's tongue grip. Later, towards the 70s, that whole time that they're being used, they were being advertised as the deadliest combat knife, or a killing tool, which didn't really float too well with the crowd back home, seeing these advertisements, since it was a commercially made knife. So Gerber added serrations to the blade here in the wasp, and started advertising it as a survival knife rather than a killing tool. How well this thing would fare as a survival knife is up in the air, but that was just some marketing magic that they did right there, and they were able to keep producing it for another 40 years at least. This tie here is not original. I added that, but that is often implemented on the originals. Later on, again, a few other variants to note. Towards the end of the Vietnam War, they stopped doing the cat's tongue grip. They kept the gray color, but they started using a material called armor hide, which I don't really have a ton of information on, so I'm not going to speak on. but the cat's tongues are certainly rare as far as collecting goes. Another very rare variant to look out for is the dive knife version of this. It had a coated sheath, and the handle of the knife would usually come in a yellow or an orange. So if you can find one of those, I would pick it up immediately. They're very, very scarce and super collectible. These knives were favored by all sorts of people during the Vietnam War. There are photos of MKII SOG guys carrying these, long-range recon, Marine Raiders, Navy SEALs, all sorts of people. So it's a very iconic blade, and you know, not quite as well known as some of the others, but still just an amazing piece of history. So if you have any questions on this knife or any of the other knives on my channel, feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Try not to make these videos too long because I can just ramble on about these things forever. But I hope you've enjoyed, and have a great day.